everyone and welcome to another Story Explained video. In today's video, we're going to be taking a deeper look into the dark mystery that resides on Uranium. Fun fact, Uranium is actually Latin for spider, wouldn't you know? In this video, we're going to be talking, of course, about the story of Choo Choo Charles and what's gone on through the whole game. So, of course, it's going to contain spoilers for Choo Choo Charles. So, with that being said, if you do enjoy these types of videos and want to see more Choo Choo Charles, make sure to hit subscribe and like and tell me if there is anything you want me to cover in relation to Choo Choo Charles. I do already have a few videos planned for Choo Choo Charles, but if I see a comment that intrigues me or really needs answering, we'll do it. Anyway, shameless self-promotion, let's get into the video, because it's going to be a long one. The game begins with Eugene telling us it's been a while since we last spoke. Eugene tells us there's something really big in the mines they've been working on, and it will help the player and our museum if we could obtain this big thing. Eugene tells us that if anyone has a chance of taking it down, it will be us, telling us it's the biggest attraction to our city. The camera pans towards a Polaroid of Charles wandering Uranium. The game world is then introduced, and we get to row into Uranium, and Eugene confirms to us that Charles is half train and half Giga Spider from How. Eugene explains that him and his friends and co-workers have been planning an attack on Charles to get rid of him for good. You as the player have the job of clearing up or tying up any of the loose ends. He introduces Uranium and then says the following line, quite ominously: "The island where miners dig their own graves." Interesting, a lot of foreshadow already. Eugene takes you to the train yard in the train that you'll be using in game. He tells you that one of the operators was killed by the Beast, not actually referring to Charles in this instance. The train has the branding Charles Mining Company, which will play a bigger part later. After checking out the train and the gun, Eugene mentions that the gun wasn't on there when he evacuated off the island originally. As you take the train for a roll and learn the basics of the gun, Charles ends the fight with a stab at Eugene, which knocks him off the train. Charles makes sure to double stab Eugene on the floor, leaving him to bleed out. Rip Eugene. In Eugene's final words, he tells you that this wasn't supposed to be how it ends. He tells us that we need to do more to help out around the island, but he doesn't have time to explain. Eugene tasks us with finding the eggs and finding his son. At this point, you're let loose on the island. Of course, there are a few set of requirement missions, but you can do them in any particular order. So I have gone around the island in a anti-clockwise fashion. So everything I relay to you at the moment will be from that sort of direction. But don't worry, your playthrough might differ, and I will have timestamps below where I talk about each individual NPC, etc, etc. Anyway, at first we're introduced to Candice. She believes that we were the newcomer that Eugene announced. She gives you some scrap and some advice, telling us that we can talk to anyone around here and they'll be willing to help. Just don't talk to anyone in masks though. Of course, this is alluding to the cult of Charles later on. You find a note in the room with the scrap metal, and it tells us of how Charles is becoming more aggressive and that there won't be anyone left to save. It's at this point you can assume that this note was written by Candice, as it's on her property and spoken in sort of her tone. Other than that, it's not signed, so it could still well be up in the air. But again, it would make more sense. If you carry on walking past Candice's house, you come across another lady standing by a fire. This is Elizabeth Murkwater. From her appearance, it's easy to make the assumption that she is indeed a witch of some kind. We catch her making fresh stew, but it's missing some ingredients. Meat. Understandably, with Charles running around, how would they even get to store livestock, as we'll come to learn later? She claims to smell a carcass in the swamp, and it's your job to grab it for her. But you must be careful, because while crossing this body of water, you're not alone, as Barry lurks in the shallow water. She refers to him as the swamp monster. In Elizabeth's hut, you come across a note for all the ingredients for the, and quote, tasty yummy stew, end quote. And it's as followed: swamp water, salt, clover, dirt, salt again, meat, any kind, human included, hee 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 hee. I can just imagine the witch cackle there, and more salt. Sounds delicious. Gordon would be jealous. Apart from the overusage of salt, the odd thing here is that she's open to using humans as meat. But I digress. You find the carcass on a small island in the swamp, and it looks like some type of pike. But this fish looks to have damage on it already, like claws have been slicing away at it. It could well be possible that Elizabeth was using it to lure Charles into the swamp, perhaps in a feud with Barry of some kind, perhaps making both beasts fight with each other, for instance. After returning the pike or fish to Elizabeth, she gives you the scrap and wishes you a safe night, little one. The little one's quite interesting there. But again, some of these loose ends I will be tying up in a new theory video, because I do have a few ideas on why these little references are here and there. After this, you progress on the train once more. You come to a small scrapyard area filled with junk and old trains. You meet Daryl. He mentions that you are a monster hunter of some type, and that you'll have to earn his respect. He mentions that one of Warren's goons dropped off a locked chest as they tried to open it. Daryl gives you a lockpick to open these chests, as he can't do it himself. You open the chest and find that it has an ancient tablet inside. This explains why one of the members of the cult had this in the first place. The tablet depicts 3 people fighting off a large train with spears. One interesting thing here is that if you go past the scrapyards towards the coast, you come across another shed, and inside is another locked chest, but more importantly, a note. And this note reads, "Someone from the mob just spotted my raft, so I can't risk waiting for you. They'll be back at any time now. I'm sorry I couldn't take you along with me, but know with certainty that I'll send help back to evacuate you and everyone else from this island as soon as I can reach the mainland. With love, Diane." I find this note rather interesting because it shows us that before Eugene, people were already trying to leave the island as fast as they could. Not to mention that this looks to be the start of the Charles cult, or as Daryl stated, Warren's goons. Something else worth noting is that this letter must have been towards a partner of some sort, or someone with thought and care, if that makes sense. Although the recipient is not named, I think we'll be able to figure out later on who this letter was for. When you go down to the raft on the beach, you'll see the fate that awaited Diane as she tried to escape. It's safe to say that she was brutally attacked, possibly even killed. Next, you come across Helen, and she greets you by calling you the Monster Hunter too. She tells us that they've already tried fighting Charles, but every time he gets significantly injured, he retreats to the wilderness. She believes that they may have found a way to make Charles commit to a mortal battle. Helen explains that if you collect all 3 eggs, which are locked away within the mines, you can summon Charles into a fight to the death. She tells us that the mining company owner, Warren Charles III, has placed armed guards around each of the eggs. After this brief dialogue, Helen and her pet Rock give you the first mine key. But before you go off to that mine, you got a chance to upgrade your weapon, and this was thanks to the introduction of Sergeant Flint. Now the name is ironic. He was making a flamethrower to aid his defense plans against Charles. Again, Sergeant Flint associates us with the Monster Hunter role. Aside from that, he mentions that his shed's on fire and that we need to put it out. Putting out the fire with the water pipe above it is enough to finish the mission for the upgrade, and of course you receive bug spray, which is the flamethrower. Just before reaching the mine again, you can enter the shed on the opposite side. In this shed you can see a new note. This note gives an update on the southern mine. It explains that the crew are settling in to work and it's coming along nicely. As you enter the mine, you come across another note. This time it's a letter to Mr. Warren Charles III from Eugene. It explains that Eugene and his team have found something rather strange, and Eugene asks Mr. Warren to check it out. Inside the mine you see a large structure, one that doesn't look like it's been made by the team of people. It looks to have been there for a long time, and the environment has built up around it. You can hear that it's guarded by one of Warren's goons. Inside the structure is one of the eggs, the green one to be precise. The egg gives off an enchanting glow and an odd noise. After the mine you can continue onwards and come towards a dock before you approach one of the characters. On the dock you can now check out 2 of the small buildings. The first building contains another note, and it reads, Unloading all the supplies has been an incredible eye-opening experience. Here at the port we've been working all day every day. We are tasked with unloading the boat and running supplies up the hill to the tracks, where Theodore and Eddie deliver them to different sites we'll be mining. The sheer cost of this infrastructure is mind-blowing. With all the success the Warren family has as in this business, I'm surprised he's chosen to take such a risk here. After this note, if we continue on further into the dock, there is a second note, and this is what it says. I've been praying for someone from the first evacuation group would just send back another boat, but I guess they all think that George's supply boat is still evacuating people. They're all safe and cozy on the mainland, but feel no obligation to make sure everyone else escapes. I know that Charles sinking the boat isn't something anyone would have expected. But still, to think, I would have left this place by now. It makes me sick. As you can see, this note looks to be for someone still waiting on evacuation from the island. It talks about someone called George and how his supply boat is still evacuating people, or George gave up and stayed away. It also appears that they had another boat ready to take people away, but it was destroyed by Charles. Down the dock you come across a man named Santiago, and this is where we think the note comes from just before. He claims that he can't stay on the island any longer, but he just needs his journal and wants you to find it and bring it back. Once you've collected the journal and return it to him, he gives you the scraps he has promised, but also mentions that he hopes you didn't look inside. Interesting. While finding Santiago's journal, you come across another NPC called Sasha, who greets you as the Monster Hunter again. She asks if we've had any experience with ghosts at all. She tells us that someone has been pinning exactly 16 drawings to the lamppost in the boulder field every night. She claims that she always collects them and then burns them, but the last time when she went out collecting them, she began hearing and seeing strange things. So she asks you if you could find the last 8 and bring them back to her. So of course you go looking for the pages, and it appears to be no minor task. The pages look like they are from the Cult of Charles. It looks and sounds as if the victims are taking you away from their death places, where they were sacrificed, protecting you or preventing you. At this point, we don't know, but this would make an excellent theory video, so subscribe for that, because that is coming soon, because I think I do have an answer for that. After finding the last page, the area becomes clear, and you return to Sasha. Something else quite interesting here is that near the boulder field is a small watchtower that's located on the outskirts of it, as at the top of the lookout there are 2 notes. The first note reads, Watch Group Schedule 0000, 0800 and 1800. And the second letter reads, Warren has had us watching the boulder field for nearly a week, but we haven't seen anything particularly interesting. We see Sasha walking through the area on occasion, and Charles occasionally makes an appearance. But Warren hasn't been interested in these things. He won't tell us what we're looking for, just to document everything and let him know if we see anything interesting. So from this section in particular, you can tell that something is really off with this island, and not just the Giga Train spider. Whoever writes these notes is aware that Sasha is walking through the boulder field, as they've been watching for a week now. But Warren isn't interested in Sasha or Charles at this point, which makes you think perhaps Warren knows there's something a little bit worse than Charles out there at the moment. After all this, you continue on, coming towards the next required mission. Next to the Lighthouse, you'll find an NPC called John Smith. John tells you that Paul asked him to make you a special weapon for fighting Charles. Because of John's demolition experience, he makes you a rocket launcher. John also states that he wanted to see Warren's empire crumble for a while. John needs to add some final touches to the rocket launcher, and this requires removing a few safety features, if you will. In the meantime, you are tasked with finding some rocket ammunition, and he directs you to the test bunker right behind his shed/home. But before you go off to the bunker, if you go upstairs, there is another note from John. I'm stuck debating if Warren made us bring our families to this hellhole so that we'd never need to leave, or to keep information about his business practices away from the mainland. Either way, I want that man in a noose. Paul asked me to design a new weapon for the Monster Hunter that Eugene is sending, and knowing what I do about explosives, you can bet I made the most powerful rocket launcher I could. Warren, you don't stand a chance. So this looks like the beginning of Warren's plan starting to unfold and unravel. It's also worth mentioning that behind John's building is a single grave. The size of the headstone makes me think it's not in particular a child, but it must be someone who is, of course, an adult, perhaps the wife of John, and this is where his hatred for Warren stems from. After getting the dynamite from the center of the blast testing zone, you use it to unlock the door from the bunker. Inside is a bloody mess and a lot of clutter around. Oh, and of course blood. Inside the bunker there is another note. Rocket launcher, ammunition test. Version 1, failed. Version 2, failed. Version 3, 13-second flight. Version 4, success. Again, it seems there's a lot of emphasis on the plan has been in place for a while. After you take the ammunition back to John, he tells you that it's all ready, and if when you're done with it, he can borrow it, as he has a few people to visit. This leads me to believe that Warren or Warren's goons were responsible for the death of a person buried in the back. I do have to wonder if that person that was buried in the back was Diane from earlier when she wrote the letter to someone about leaving on the boat, but she got caught. Next to John is a type of watchtower, and at the top resides Greg. He tells you that the mine boss Warren has been keeping 3 monster eggs locked away in the mines, and he says that everyone is unsure on why he wants to protect these eggs, implying that if they hatched, there would be even more little Charleses. He explains the plan again. After explaining it once again, you do receive the North Mine key from him. And there's also a note that Greg has on his table, and it reads, I need to write this theory down fast before Warren finds out that I'm onto his dirty plot. My theory is that Mr. Warren Warlord III is trying to hatch and raise more of these 8-legged critters, a whole army for who knows of what purpose. They found a whole nest of those eggs while clearing out the debris from the cave-in. We also know that they're hard as diamonds, completely indestructible. The miners spent months using the temple prison to suck energy out of all the eggs, but before they could destroy the last 3, Old Man Warren stopped them. Warren must have realized how powerful these things are, and rather than protect us from them, wants to use them to take over the world. I'm on to you, Warren. Greg, genius extraordinaire. While it's interesting that Greg is basically putting me out of my YouTube job, there are a few details in there that are quite intriguing. The fact that we have a type of scale of how long it's been, which of course is now 3 months, and the fact the eggs are hard as diamond. Also, the fact they can be harvested for energy. That is quite interesting too. And again, grounds for another video. This mine you can visit a little bit later in the game, so we'll touch on that as we go for now though. So, you make your way past Greg's tower and head to the lighthouse. In the lighthouse you come across Claire. She asks for a favour as the breakers on the side of the lighthouse are broken. Claire claims that she was recently attacked by Charles and has broken her leg. They plan on using the lighthouse to signal any and all passing ships that come by. On the table is another note. Ocean Watch, Day 68. Please deliver a copy to Paul. I went outside to do a routine check of the lighthouse. As I walked around the corner of the building, I saw that beast, Charles. He spotted me and charged straight up the hill in my direction. That spider train is a hideous monster. I can't understand why Warren wants us to stay on Uranium instead of trying to escape the beast. I suppose Warren has simply gone crazy, thinking he can handle the situation on his own. In any case, Charles ran right over me, trampling my leg. I won't be able to attend the upcoming meeting and have asked Greg to bring back a copy of your notes if possible. From Claire. After the lighthouse, you can continue on to the required missions again. Any extra will come at the end of the video before the final fight. You first come to the North Mine, which Greg gave you a key for a little earlier. This mine is guarded by a few of the cult members, as per usual at this point. Inside the mine is another one of Warren's goons, and if you look around the area, you will find another note. And this note is from Warren to one of the cultists.
Make sure nobody goes near the egg. If you see anyone that shouldn't be there, shoot them immediately. No risks can be taken. As soon as it finishes, kill it. Bring the body to me. Warren C. III.
That's right, I am available for voice acting right now. So in short, it's very much shoot on sight. But interestingly, if we look at the text, it looks like they're feeding something. While this note is part very, very vague, it does state as if it's shifting attention from the intruders to whatever they are supposed to be focusing on. And it sounds like they're feeding it whatever it is. I wonder if it's the egg. Perhaps the egg can actually harvest energy from people, or miners in this case. But again, a video is due soon. Anyway, I digress. After you gain the blue egg from the mine, you continue and you come across the Uranium multi-purpose building. Inside on the first floor is a type of meeting hall, and there is another note. This one, rather interestingly, says, Mutiny meeting notes. I have discussed our latest battle plan with everyone, and nobody had objections. The whole crew knows what to do and will set the track's directions accordingly when the time comes. All the archivist needs to do is focus on pummeling that beast, keeping his distance, and getting Charles to his weakest point. My father should be back within 2 days, at which point we can supply him and the hunter with the keys and the other supplies we've gathered. We never wanted to take such harsh action against Warren and the other minders, but he's twisted our arms too long. Charles needs to go, and Warren won't stand in our way. And above this note upstairs, there's another note as well that says Stakeout Summary, Day 3, Location 4. I've been staking out this area for a few days, and Charles has never crossed the old wooden bridge. Somehow, that beast is cunning enough to know it's dangerous. But if he's angry and desperate, he might just chase someone across it. Then BAM! We use John's bomb to blow the whole thing up, and Charles falls face first into the canyon. If the blast doesn't kill him, the fall surely will. It seems that the people of Uranium now have a plan of action for taking out Charles. This is when you meet Paul. His father, Eugene, already told him about you. It's thought so far that the player has chosen not to tell Paul of his father's demise. He tells you about the plans and that you need to attach some explosives to the bridge, so that when the time is right they can detonate it, leaving Charles to fall to his death. After you place all of the items, he gives you the key to the temple for when you need to summon Charles for the fight to the death. But before we do that though, we have to get the final egg, and we still have some more stops to make. Right after the Uranium multi-purpose building, you come across a small shed-like house beside the track where you can find a new weapon. Gertrude is the one that will greet you, and she mentions that her late husband built a gun to fight Charles, but Warren's goons stole the barrel, and of course it's your job to go and fetch it. Also, we need to name it Bob as memory of her husband. Interestingly enough, this could be a callback to the very first interaction with Eugene, where he claims that the gun wasn't originally on the train, but perhaps this is who made it in that way. So it sounds like Bob was the one who adapted the train to fight Charles. This fetch job will make you go deeper into the cult's lairs, but the reward is worth it. But before you go, next to Gertrude's house seems to be a gathering place of some sort, and maybe something quite religious, and inside there are 2 notes. The first one says, To Mr. Reverend, today's sermon was a true inspiration during these trying times, very well thought out and thorough in every manner. I believe I speak for the whole congregation when I say that we admire your confidence and steadfast wisdom as we grieve our lost brothers and sisters. And as you go further into this building, you come across the Mr. Reverend's note, and this says, Sermon Outline. God is very, very mad. I think probably. Charles may be the devil, 96% certain. Always sneaky. Spider versus snake. Spiders have more legs usually. God always wins, hopefully. Sacrifices. Ask for volunteers. Don't cry a lot. Just a little. Closing prayer. Clean up. So it sounds like from these notes and how it's portrayed, Mr. Reverend was also going off hope. But more importantly, he's killing innocent people by tricking them into thinking they are volunteers. After this place, we come to an area where the cultist resides, and inside there is a note on top of a smaller tower, and it reads, We've been digging for over a month, and I'm beginning to wonder what we're really doing here. There are ancient stone ruins above the ground, as well as ruins being discovered underground. Some sort of temple in a large cavern was uncovered at one of the other mines. Are we really digging for gold veins? After we get the railgun, we must reverse back to the required NPC mission where we will get the key for the final mine. This last requirement NPC mission comes from Gale. He mentions that Paul left him the key to the mine as Paul trusts Gale. He mentions that the prism looks to have been designed to destroy the eggs. And Gale also mentions that the real warning is that Charles can absorb that energy that comes from destroying the eggs, which will alter his strength and other features. He mentions they saw it once before, which is a very interesting detail. Gale tells you that he may be even more dangerous than before, and thus you get the key to the last mine. But just before you go into the mine, you can find another note just before the main mine entrance. The note reads, "We tried and we failed. By the time we managed to clear the wreckage, everyone had already passed. I'm saddened, truly distraught. I thought of these men like brothers, causing these circumstances to cut deeper than I could have imagined." So from this note, of course, we can tell what happened to the majority of the miners and why the families are extremely upset. After this, we arrive at the entrance of the last mine. Outside of this mine, it looks to have some type of structure before the door, which has been made some time ago. Judging by the condition of the pillars and the rocks themselves, I don't think they're made by Warren and the cultists. I think they were there before. Inside the mine, you'll come across a large area that's guarded by one of Warren's men, and in the right side of this large room, you'll find a note which reads, "We aren't alone in this place. I can hear skittering all around me, the walls, the ceilings, the caverns beneath the floors. I don't know why I'm even writing this, perhaps to look back at it in a week's time and see how crazy I acted, scared over nothing. Hopefully I can look back at this in a week's time. Hopefully." After this daunting note, you have to stealthily pass some more of the cultists. While doing this, there is another note on the table just before you find the lift. The note reads, "There is hardly time to grieve with Warren instructing us to disassemble the camp here. He won't take responsibility, and he's forcing us to cover up this event in the most literal sense. We've removed the larger train tracks from the mine, put in the minecart tracks, and filled in the mine tunnel. He even had us remove the blooded mining train and store it in the outside station, as if nothing happened." Once this section of the mine is done, you come across a lift to go even deeper. The lift takes you down into this area where you can find the final egg. Now we can work on some of the side missions that we missed from earlier. So of course this will have no particular order, but of course I'm going to start with Ronnie. Ronnie asks you to get something from the top of the tower in exchange for payment, which you agree to. Interestingly, Ronnie mentions that Mr. Warren never told anyone on the mainland about the mining operation, and that he never reported the cave-in. Also, the fact that none of the miners received any paperwork. So it looks as if Warren was planning this very early on, or he knew they weren't coming back. Ronnie mentions that the towers were here years before mining took place, which is even more evidence that Warren really knows what's going on and what he planned on doing to the poor miners and their families. In one of the towers you can find another note, one that looks to be written by Warren himself, and it reads,
"Setting the foundation for this operation has been considerably more complicated than I expected, not only by cost but the logistics of the construction and delivery of the supplies for the primary mine sites. We need to strike gold fast if we want any chance of avoiding bankruptcy."
I seriously don't know why I've put that accent on. Anyway, after collecting the employee contracts, you give them back to Ronnie, and of course you get your scrap in return. On my next NPC encounter, I met Tony Tiddle. You can tell Gavin had some real fun with these names, because they're really hard to try and read, without boyishly laughing at them. Tony tells us that he's happy we're here to help out with their predicament with Charles and Warren. He gives you the key to his barn, where he has some metal scraps for us. Inside the barn is a note hanging on the post, and it reads, "Supply list. Chicken feed, goat feed, fencing supplies." Wow, scratch all that. No need to feed or fence the animals that have already been eaten. So it does sound like there's no livestock left on the island because of Charles. Nice to know that he didn't just enjoy humans after all. Also upstairs in the barn is another note. Even though Eugene has promised to send help once he reaches the mainland, I've just realised he's never mentioned if he'd return. I suppose he is the type of person to ignore the fine details of a plan. Everyone on the island is trying to find a way out of this mess, and I can only hope that the archivist friend of his can work some magic. I don't care what strange things they've done before or what practices they use, as long as Charles ends up dead. Most folks around here want the same, but then there are those crazies that want to leave him be. That darn Warren, he's lost his marbles. After Tony, the next NPC I came across was the Pickle Lady. And yep, as you've guessed it, she needs her pickles. And of course, inside her home is a note from the Pickles showing her love for pickles. If you follow the path up the hills, from her house you can come across a small mine with a locked chest. Now, because we're so far in the game, we actually have access to the lockpicks, so we can get the Pickle Lady's pickles. And yes, there's another note, and it's from Pickles. The last NPC we can talk to is Theodore. He tells you that a special box of his is in a rail car where some of Warren's goons are hanging out. He wants you to find a blue box and bring it back to him, and you can have some scrap in return. Before we do that though, there is a note on the table which looks like it's written by Theodore, and it says, "Before the cave-in, I pushed a spare rail car into the canyon using my beautiful old mining train. I figured a rail car would be a fine place to hide more important belongings, especially on a raw and unfinished track. I went to get something out of my rail car in the canyon about a week ago, but some of Warren's men have built a campsite or base of some sort there. I don't know how to get my box safely, and I don't know how long I'm going to last without it." Once you finish getting the blue box, there is nothing left for you to do now but summon Charles for the fight to the death. Time to approach the large prism, where we will use all 3 eggs to summon Charles, but first we must deal with some of Warren's goons. And I don't know about you, but I just got out the rocket launcher and shot from afar. After dealing with Warren's men, we get to the top of the prism and open the door. Inside is the object where we can use the eggs to summon Charles. Clicking it will activate an ending cutscene where Warren pleads with us not to go through with this as we don't know what we're doing. For a moment, I actually believe he could be right. But then we get to fight Charles, and I think my voice acting was very far off. After a very tiresome battle and a few jump scares, you win the fight. It's at this point that Paul's plan comes full circle, as you end the fight and it switches to the scene near the multi-purpose building. The bombs explode on the bridge as Charles passes, and he falls to his death, face first into some wooden spikes. Very fitting. It's safe to say how Charles isn't coming back from this one. But more importantly, the ending shows us another cutscene where the camera pans down into a mine with another egg that's starting to move or hatch. The camera pounds around the egg and its movements intensifies. We get the disturbing sight that there are thousands of eggs lying in wait, and perhaps the death of Charles has caused a reaction for them to spawn. It's safe to say that Charles did find a home on an island and laid the eggs for after he's gone. But I do have another video coming explaining the ending in a little bit more of a condensed manner, so again, stick around for that one and hit subscribe if you want to see it. Perhaps in some case, Warren was correct in the warning for us not to kill Charles, because of course, it would have been easier to deal with one rather than 1,000 of Charles. But that's for another theory video. Thank you so much for watching this video where I explained the story of Choo Choo Charles, and now that this video is done, it's time for the theories to fly. So if you want to see some more Choo Choo Charles coverage, make sure you hit like, comment and subscribe, do all the usual stuff, and make sure you ring that bell for when the next Choo Choo Charles theory comes out, because of course I'll be covering it like mad in between project playtime. So with that being said, let me know what you thought of this video in the comments below, and again, remember to like, comment and subscribe, do all the usual stuff for the YouTubery stuff, and if there's anything I've missed, let me know in the comments below, and if you want me to explore the game a little bit more or answer some questions that you have, please, again, ask away. More than happy to do so. But with that being said, thank you ever so much for sticking with me in this video. It's been a long one, and I wish you the best morning, day, or night, wherever you are in the world. Stay safe, and I'll see you all in the next Choo Choo Charles video.